All right, we are about 3 minutes, almost 4 minutes past the hour. So I'm going to spotlight our founder and executive director, Dr. Sephora Gur, who would like to welcome you to today's event.
Hi, I'm Tzipi Gur, and as many of you know, I founded Classrooms Without Borders 13 years ago, together with an amazing board, in order to assist teachers and educators to promote tolerance and justice in their classrooms, their schools, and in our world. I'm both the daughter of a Holocaust survivor and an Israeli citizen. Personally and institutionally, we are heartbroken for the defenseless civilians taken captive into the Gaza Strip, as well as their families and the families of those innocents who were brutalized and murdered by terrorists. What has emerged in the past 4 days in the wake of the savage attacks on the Israelis and the State of Israel has shaken the entire decent and reasonable world. As difficult as the information and images are, as educators, we have to face them with dignity and find the most suitable path to convey to our students what is at stake here. That there is true evil in the world, that decent societies and nations have to be vigilant against those who do not recognize the humanity of their fellow human beings, that human rights and dignity for all are not just slogans, but the only way that people in this world can prosper. Over the past 4 days, we have been overwhelmed with requests from teachers and students asking for materials to explain what is going on, to offer their support for Israel and asking what they can do to help. Our organization is very busy working on educational materials for middle and high school teachers so that they can teach those students about those current events taking place in Israel. Today, we asked our scholar in residence, Avi Ben-Hur, who lives in Israel with his family, to speak to us about the situation on the ground, to give analysis about how we arrived at this moment and where things might potentially go. Avi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tzipi. Welcome, everybody. It's a little bit after 9 o'clock in the evening here in Jerusalem. Hopefully everybody can hear me properly and see me properly. Before I begin, I just have to say that, and this is being very serious, if there's going to be a red alert here, I'm going to have to leave and go into our fortified safe space in our building. About 2 hours ago, Tel Aviv was hit with a barrage. And also about 2 hours ago, there was a big false alarm of a whole flotilla of drones that had crossed over from Hezbollah from Lebanon into Israel, which turned out not to be the case. So this is where we're at right now on a micro level. So I believe that all of you have probably pretty good access to fairly good information in terms of the events that unfolded, videos, analyses, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I've done is I've not looked at videos, with the exception of just one seeing breaking through part of the barrier in the south. But I've deliberately shied away from it, and I'm not going to be showing you images today. You have access to those kind of things if you need them or want them. Personally, I think that it's unnecessary. Just like in 2014, when ISIS was beheading people, and you can see it on YouTube, it wasn't necessary for me to see a human being being beheaded. It's enough that I read about it, that I understood what was going on. What I would like to do with you on this session is the following. I want to kind of reflect for you, give you a sense of what's happening on the ground in Israel from the perspective of somebody who is experiencing it right now. I will give analysis of what transpired, how it transpired, but that's not going to be the main object that we're doing here. And you'll also have an opportunity also to ask questions, of course, and maybe to vent a little bit. So let me just speak the obvious. On a personal level, it's taken me about 3 days to get out of what was, I guess, I was in shock from the events that took place. I have to say that my personal immediate family was not harmed. My wife has 2 cousins who lived in a community that was attacked. They've had losses. When it's not clear to us, I think my wife's cousin's father-in-law was murdered, and there are some missing children. We don't want to. We're not poking and trying to get information. We're waiting to hear from them, but right now we don't really know. And virtually every Israeli knows somebody or has a member of their family who was directly touched by these events. We're a very small country, and a lot of people were killed, and a lot of people were harmed. So I would say the country's been in shock, dismay, bereavement, despair. And I would say in the last 3 days also beginning to be mobilized. Civil society has become mobilized. And that's something we're going to talk about as well. My 2 girls have been volunteering, making food packages, both for evacuated families and also for soldiers down the front, both of them. They're both teens, and they're both very active. My wife, who is a clinical psychologist and psychoanalyst, has volunteered free therapy sessions for people who are in trauma. Unfortunately, she has COVID right now, so once she pulls out of COVID, she's going to jump straight into that. So people are really trying to find a way to make a contribution. I'm talking now about civil society in particular. I was with an American group, African-American politicians, 3 weeks ago in kibbutz Kfar Aza, one of 2 kibbutzim that were completely overrun, and many of the members were murdered or taken captive. Some of the people we met are no longer with us. This is 3 weeks ago. We were there, so this is something that is very, very immediate. We're still having barrages of rockets, as I mentioned earlier. I have my 90-year-old mother-in-law living with us now, who has dementia, who I cannot get to the fortified safe space and time. It's just not technically possible. We have a problem. So I'm just sharing. It's not all about us, but I want to give you a sense of somebody who's living through this, how it's going. And school is out. We're back to, if you will, almost like the COVID mode, where they're doing Zoom sessions, but they only started that today. And the Ministry of Defense was warning the schools about the Zoom. And lo and behold, Hamas guy got on a school Zoom, not my kid's school, but somewhere else in the country. So this is where we're at, as kind of a snapshot right now. Something else you may find interesting is that you had more information, certainly more visual information than we did here. Why is that the case? The IDF, together with the local Israeli news channels, stations, collaborated and cooperated with a partial blackout. So a lot of the videos that you could have seen in CNN or CBS or whatever your choice of news is, were not accessible to us in Israel. They were accessible if we went on to CNN, but they were not accessible in Hebrew on the Israeli news. So actually a lot of the gruesome and horrific stuff that was going on, you saw it before, a lot of us saw it here. There was kind of a news blackout, and therefore I think a lot of the shock here was even bigger for Israelis. I mentioned the fact that civil society is mobilized. I gave some examples of my wife and my kids. What's happening here is absolutely insane. I'm just going to give you a few examples of what I'm talking about here. As you well know, for the last 10 months, there have been massive demonstrations against the government, and demonstrations are fairly well organized. There are several different organizations that rose in the last 10 months. Virtually all of them have taken their organizational apparatus and focused them now exclusively on helping out the evacuated people. In one case, one of the bigger protest groups in Israel, which is called Brothers and Sisters in Arms, went down there with their cars, and they were evacuating civilians while the fighting was going on, even before the the military was evacuating civilians. I mean, they were very proactive about it, and they used their organizational skills to do that, with no political messaging whatsoever. It's very important to say that. So this is very good news, what I'm saying right now. We've had the biggest and we've had the fastest reservist call-up in Israel's history. So I assume a lot of you are aware of this. Our standing army is about 1/3 of our military force. 2/3 is a reserve army, and we got 300,000 people out there in like a day and a half. It's the fastest ever in Israel. So it was done very, very quickly. There have been issues with equipment shortages just because of the numbers of people, but that's being worked out now. In other words, reservists who are worried about what's going on in their homes. In other words, we have rockets coming down, are just running down to do their service and leaving their spouses and their families to cope on their own. So the country is mobilized. It's very important. Something else that will probably not resonate for most of you. You cannot buy bottled water now in the supermarket, and we're running out of tin cans, like tuna fish and all kinds of stuff that are in tin cans. What I'm trying to tell you is people are preparing for a war. They're preparing for the stockpiling water and also all kinds of non-perishable foods in the fortified safe spaces. The last time I experienced something like this was the first Gulf War. No, is that right? Yes, the first Gulf War is when I experienced that. And I was quite young here. It was a very long time ago. And I remember, okay, this is what war is like. You have to, yeah, okay, that makes sense. We have to stockpile food and water. So I actually started a few days before everybody else. But just, you can't get a lot of stuff now. And there is a real concern that another front, specifically in the north facing Hezbollah, can open up. And in that scenario, we're talking about people have to have.
Okay, I was picking out a few
muted.
just to
Somebody's not muted.
to do that, and I saw a
muted.
few more came in, so I'll do that too. I'll just email them separately.
Erica. Okay. So
Apologies.
basically, we have people who are stockpiling food and water, and people have to have enough food and water for each individual for at least 72 hours. So this is where we are right now. Hot off the press as of about 5 hours ago, after 3 days of negotiations, we now have they're calling it a war management cabinet. In other words, Benny Gantz, who is part of the political opposition, is also a former chief of staff, is joining Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, and Yoav Gallant, who is the defense minister, in a war management cabinet. Gadi Eisenkot, who is in Gantz's party, also who was a very, very good former chief of staff, is also part of this cabinet as an observer, as is Ron Dermer, who is a confidant of Benjamin Netanyahu's. Yair Lapid is allowed to join this cabinet. So it's going to be specific, and an agreement was made that no legislation, no changes are going to be made until this war is over. So that was the agreement that was finally hammered out. And so this is very important, particularly establishing some trust, public trust in the government, which was really, really lacking. I also have to say to you, and I don't know how clear this is, but particularly in the Hebrew news, in the last 2 days, there have been more and more calls, particularly from, I have to say, from news pundits and from some academics, calling for the prime minister's resignation. Just putting it out there, so you know that's something that is gathering some steam, but not. It's not the big thing on. It's not the big thing on the agenda. With your permission, I'm actually going to stop here, and I'm going to look at some of the questions that have come into the chat and answer them, and then I'll continue talking. Okay, I think this makes it better for everybody. Okay, so I'm being asked by Rob Mallet. Hi, Bob. Glad you're here. about the U.S. and Israeli intelligence fiasco. I'm going to address that. That's my next thing I'm going to address. So, Bob, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to wait on that one. That's a great question, and I'm planning on addressing it systematically. So, definitely going to be doing that. Okay, Dr. Josh Andy, one of our stellar teachers of Class Without Borders. What can we do as educators and teachers to educate our students and our peers? What can we do to aid Israel and to raise money or support the evacuees? Okay, so as Tippy mentioned before, we're working now on, first of all, on materials for teachers, middle school and high school. And I'm working together with the team in Pittsburgh. That's number one. So we're preparing materials. I think it has to be age appropriate. It's very, very tricky here because I'm not naive. Middle school kids certainly have access to this, I don't know what to call this, terror porn. These horrific videos, which are terrible to look at. And I think one has to be cautious and careful with that age group. But I think that there has to be, I believe, kind of a common agreement that there are certain modes of behavior for human beings that are unacceptable no matter what. Okay, I'll just say one sentence and I'll move on from this. Look, folks, if you haven't heard this, there were babies who were beheaded. Enough said. I don't have to say anything else now. There's certain behavior that is unacceptable in normative, reasonable, decent societies. And those red lines were crossed. And so it has to be, I think, clarified. By the way, the United States, the European Union, there are a whole slew of countries that for years have designated Hamas as a terror organization. What we've discovered now is that they are much, much closer to ISIS than most of us thought. And I think any discussion you're going to have, we need to clarify both the teachers and the kids that there are certain things that are just inexcusable, okay, including in national conflicts. There's certain behavior, there's certain lines that can't be crossed. And I think there has to be a kind of accepted starting point. That's a logical one that people can hold on to. And obviously, this is the story of the Middle East and the story of the Arab-Israeli conflict and the story of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. These are all very complicated issues that need to be not dumbed down, but need to be fleshed out systematically, accessibly, and reasonably. So again, this is something, it's a work in process, but this is my opening shots. What can you do to aid Israel? So actually I was going to talk about it at the very, very end, but since Josh raised it right now, look, I'm going to state the obvious right now. What Israel needs from friends abroad right now, probably more than anything else, is political backing. In other words, we are at not the middle, but we're in the very beginning of a very ugly war that is probably going to take quite some time. And sometime soon, and I don't know what the magic number is, Israel's going to start to lose support. I don't know if 10,000 Gazans are killed, is that the magic number when countries who have been supportive of Israel up to this moment say, wait a second, you're exaggerating, it's disproportionate, your response, I don't know. These kind of things, I mean, that's something that we see in every conflict here. I think it's important, and this is both for the students as well, but for us to keep in mind that President Biden came out very strident and very clear in his address yesterday. But, talk is cheap, but sending an aircraft carrier and sending ammunition that already landed in Israel is not talk, that's action. And the United States of America has been proactive as a good friend of Israel in the last 48 hours. This has to be said clearly. The weaponry ammunition that landed in Israel is important weaponry. It's strategic weaponry that we are going to need. And an aircraft carrier in our seas here is a very strong warning to Hezbollah, to Iran, and may help, maybe, we'll talk more about this, the opening of a multi-front war over here. So what can you do? It's to, if you see that some of the politician representatives are backsliding or starting to have doubts, have to express to them that that every country in the world, decent or indecent, it's unacceptable what happened here. For 1,200 of its citizens to be murdered, most of them, the overwhelming majority, over 90% of them, are civilians, unarmed civilians, and between 100 and 200 people taken hostage, grandparents, toddlers. No country, decent or indecent, would suffer it. So I think we have to remind some of your elected representatives of that. If you see black backsliding, that's what I think I would say right now. I think that to encourage children, just like my kids are out there making literally making care packages and sending them out, you can encourage your kids to write letters of support to their peers in Israel. And yeah, I think that there are, and Tippy knows how to do this better than I do, there are definitely there are organizations like the JDC, the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, that's doing amazing work, okay, with supplying that you can contribute to, that are just doing humanitarian work, and it's very, very important. And I think these are the most critical things that you can do. More questions? Sorry, that was a long answer to a short question. Okay, I'm being asked, is intelligence improved? I'm gonna get back to this question when I jump in really to the issue of what happened. Same thing with Wayne asking about dividing up the troops. I'm sorry, because I want to do. We'll get to that. All right. So my buddy Sean is asking, since this is like Israel's 9/11, do I think that this is going to have the same long-term impact on Israel as 9/11 did on the United States? The answer is unequivocally yes. This is going to be a generational impact. This is no longer the same country as it was on Friday. And this I'm saying to you very, very clear-eyed. There has been and this is maybe different from what happened in the US, there has been a dramatic rupture of faith in governmental institutions, in the security establishment, in basic security, because this has been a systemic failure, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. And it's going to take quite a lot to bring that faith back, both in the government and also in the security establishment. It will take time. And the actions of Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and others that joined in have been so gruesome, heinous, so inhuman. 9/11 was the worst terror attack, I think, in human history in terms of the amount of people killed. It was a mega attack that had never been done before. The United States was hit, but the United States does not have an ethos, the same ethos as Jewish people in the state of Israel. And the comparisons here, I mean, we're hearing a lot of people saying, and I think it's a very powerful statement, we did not rise up like a phoenix from the ashes of the Holocaust for this to happen to us in our own country with our own army. And that's a very, very powerful statement and sentiment. And I have to say now, just I'm going something I want to, my third piece, but I'm going to talk about it just 30 seconds now. It's not about revenge or vengeance. This won't abide, and it can't be repeated. And the question is, what can Israel do about it? And we're gonna get to that. Okay. Okay, the question about invasion of Gaza, I'm going to get to it later on. What can Israel do to get world support like they had in the 50s? Is there any real push from the population for a two-state solution? So Bernard, first of all, what I've seen is that at the moment, most of, but not all of, the decent world is very, very supportive of Israel at this moment. Not Putin. I said the decent world, not Putin at all. China hasn't really, has been very, has been equivocating. Russia has come on the Palestinian side of this. I think that the support, as I mentioned before, will be eroded over time. If this is going to be a long war and we see the deaths of a lot of civilians, innocent Gazan civilians, the support of Israel will be eroded under those circumstances. And to the question about a real push for a two-state solution, if I take you back before this past Saturday, if I take you back before October 7th, the last public opinion polls that were done, both among Palestinians and Israelis, about 3 months ago, showed that less than 50% on both sides of this story were for a two-state solution. Nobody is talking about that, and it's interesting because this is not part of the discourse now. How do we get to how do we get is two-state solution maybe a peaceful solution? I don't think the big questions that are in the public discourse at this moment are about how do we get to peace. I think that there are more immediate questions, like having between 1 and 200 hostages, most of them civilians, in the hands of these maniacs, and what do we do about that? And how do we protect ourselves now? How do we I don't know, recreate deterrence? And we're going to talk about that as well. Okay, so yeah, not making any moral equivalency, and that's not the idea. I'm being asked the question, do I think that the world has made any progress regarding hate, racism, and anti-Semitism since 1948? Sorry to say that there is some progress, but not a lot of progress. And all of us know that we've seen a lot of anti-Semitic events taking place in Western countries in the last 3 to 5 years, including countries where the killing grounds during the Holocaust, including in the United States, where we're seeing the rise of anti-Semitism. So, 2 steps up, 1 step back. We're seeing a lot of racism as well. Having said that, it appeared as though being openly anti-Semitic or openly racist was inexcusable in polite society. I'm not sure that's the case anymore. I think a lot of that's being couched, and to be honest, Bob, I think that the social networks have completely opened the floodgates. All the stuff that was hiding under the carpet is now exposed. We saw it in talkbacks before you had the social networks, and now there's no social networks that just made it. It's a paradise for spreading hate. We even have people who run some of these social networks who are either not prohibiting it or they're encouraging it. So, and this has not been a tool for good things. So Ellen's saying that she read that approximately 30 countries have citizens murdered or kidnapped. Would that buy Israel more time to act than usual, or will put added pressure on Israel from countries' citizens are being held hostage? Ellen's interesting question. I want to address a little bit later, but I'll just say very, very briefly right now that I'm not aware of a country that's got between 100 and 200 of its civilians that have been kidnapped and dragged into a foreign entity by a terror organization. And I think about parallels like what happened with the Iranian hostage crisis in '79, which I think was 52 hostages, and they spent 440 some odd days, maybe 444, 442, I don't remember, days. And the United States tried one. There was one military attempt and it failed. So I don't think any country really has experience in what Israel is experiencing right now. But it's not just about the captives. We've had, to the last count, we've had at least 1,200 citizens murdered. And as I said before, over 95% of them unarmed civilians. So, like I said, it resonates more like 9/11 than it does anything else. And we are seeing a fair amount of sympathy. I think that what I want to do now, with your permission, I'm stopping answering the questions for a moment. I'll get back to them. I want to continue on my second piece because it's going to be answering some of the questions that were already raised and maybe some of them that are flowing in. So with your permission, I'm going to continue. Let me ask the rhetorical question. How did this transpire? How did this happen? So first and foremost, unfortunately, in a very similar mode to what happened in Israel in 1973, is that there was a political and military concept about Hamas, who Hamas is, what their goals are, how they can be deterred, the use of high-tech, over-reliance on very sophisticated technology as solutions for tactical problems. We actually had a complete intelligence failure. They really, really got one over on our intelligence, and this is a systemic intelligence failure. Because we relied on so much technology, Hamas found a way to overcome the technology relatively simply, and I'll explain how in a moment. And we had unmanned and undermanned positions, and they were actually able to break through very, very quickly in 30 places, and enter into over 20 civilian communities and attack 4 army bases unawares. We also had most of the command of that area located in one base, and they actually got there very, very quickly, a surprise attack, and killed actually a lot of the commanders very, very quickly. And so there was a lot of confusion and lack of understanding of what was actually happening on the ground, which also delayed the sending of forces. The first forces to actually get down there and do something significant was the Air Force. Once they were alerted to something, they took off, but they had nobody directing from the ground. They didn't, difficult to understand what the targets were. And they're actually getting WhatsApps from people on the ground, and they were using that, and the Air Force actually killed probably over 1,000 terrorists, either trying to get in or on their way back. So that was like the first successful interception, but it was very, very late. And the civilian communities were left to fend for themselves for hours and hours and hours. So this is really a terrible systemic, complete systemic failure. What was the concept? That Hamas needs Qatari money to keep themselves functioning there. And Israel had just doubled the numbers. We had doubled the numbers of Gazans that could work in Israel, up to 20,000. 20,000 Gazans were supporting 100,000 because the salaries they're getting in Israel were so large compared to what they could earn there. They were actually, each person was supporting another 4 or 5. The idea was they wanted quiet, and they also projected that they knew we were listening in. They kind of project that. They fooled Israel. They fooled the intelligence community. It has to be said that on the political level, the government decided to let more workers in, and the government also thought that Hamas was deterred. Okay, that keep them happy with the Qatari money. Okay, and have workers come in, and every once in a while they'll be shooting up and back, and we'll just keep going that way. And we were completely fooled by that. I would also say the following: what all of us learned. Some people knew this, but some didn't. Some perceived Hamas as an extreme Islamist liberation movement. What we now understand is clearly Hamas is ISIS. Okay? Because no freedom movement is going to behead babies. That is, it doesn't make sense if there's no interest for them to do so. And we have to say, unfortunately, that Israel disparaged its enemy. We didn't respect our enemy. And this is, you know, hubris is a very, very bad thing. That's when you make real mistakes. And this is a doozy. This is a real doozy. We disparaged them even after the events. We had pundits saying, oh, it must have been the Iranians behind this. No, it was Hamas behind this. We really haven't found too many Iranian fingerprints on this, to be honest. And this is a cultural problem that we have to overcome. We really need to not disparage our enemies. Know that people who hate us, and we have to respect the fact they will do everything they can to harm us. What we've learned now, as I said, is Hamas is like ISIS. This is a group of terrorists, simple and plain. Same thing as Islamic Jihad. That there's no real you can't have dialogue with people like this. This has become very, very clear. On a blow by blow technical issue, what they did was they began to shoot barrages of rockets as to divert attention. And at the same time, they sent up drones that dropped bombs on the towers with the cellular networks. Everything was remote control. We had remote controlled machine guns there. All the monitoring systems were remote controlled. They actually rendered them inoperative within several minutes, so we were blind and we couldn't see what was happening there. As I said, it was undermanned. The barrier that we spent almost $1 billion, that's with a B, $1 billion on, above and below the ground, a super high tech, first of its kind in the world, to detect tunnels and whatnot. We had several gates in it, so we could actually cross into Gaza if necessary. And those are weak points. And they made 30. They blew up 30 of these gates and entered through with cars, trucks, motorcycles. You had at least 1,500 Hamas terrorists enter, and you had probably a similar number of hangers on, Islamic Jihad, and so on and so forth. We have thousands of terrorists enter the country. Just to give you a sense, we have already these 1,500 bodies of dead terrorists that we've killed, 1,500 dead terrorists. Okay, and we have tens of terrorists that we've captured alive. Many of them got out. So we're talking, and you know, it's not a foregone conclusion that we've managed to completely clear out every terrorist. I can't say that hand on heart. I'm not sure if that's the case. That's what we're being told by the government. I'm not sure that that's that they have all the knowledge on that. And so they were very quick with this. And I said we concentrated commanders on one base. So it was not intelligent. So we had a systemic failure, an intelligence failure, a policy failure. We didn't deploy our troops properly. Okay, a very low state of alert. This also, the army got there very, very late, too late, way too late. So I think I answered some of those questions that popped up before, and now I want to go back to some of the questions and that I may have missed. Because I said I would answer, so I want to give you guys what you deserve. So, all right, the question about invasion of Gaza, that's my last piece, so I'm gonna you have to wait for that. Sorry. Okay, well, no, that's also the last thing. A sort of dynamic and cooperative spirit is going to happen in this new cabinet. We'll get to that. All right. We see a lot of the families of the hostages saying they have not received any information from the government. Why do I think that's the case? Is it because they do not have anything to tell them, or because they know there's little chance of rescuing them? Who asked me this? Susan. Look, I want to be very honest and blunt. This is the reality. The government has been missing in action for the first 48 to 72 hours of this. No, we didn't hear things from ministers in the government. Unfortunately, a lot of the very few government ministers visited bereaved families or hospitals, or the government has been dysfunctional up until about 5 minutes ago, and so this is part of the dysfunction in terms of notifying families. I also think that the government doesn't know yet, okay, who how many captives there are there, and who are the captives. As far as I saw earlier today in the news feed, there have been like declarations of 4,000 missing people. So I don't know what to make of that. 4,000 missing people can mean that there are a lot more dead people that we haven't found yet. It could also mean that the bad guys grabbed a lot more people than we know or think there. So we don't know. And I think that any government can't, if they don't have the information, they can't come to a family and say, they can't say, they have nothing to say. I mean, they don't have the information. And I think also there's an attempt to keep down public hysteria about this issue as well. If they go to the family and say, we don't know, we have no idea, that's telling the public that the government is not functioning and the government is wavering. So I'm not making any excuses for the inaction or action of this government right now. I'm just saying what I understand. This is my analysis. I think they simply don't know yet. We don't know yet how many people have ultimately been murdered and how many people have been held captive. We don't know how many people who are held captive were killed by our bombings in the last few days. We have no idea. We have no idea, no way of telling. So I know that may not have been a satisfactory answer. Question of rescuing them, we're going to talk about that a little bit. Okay, Leslie, I'm gonna answer your question about Israeli retaliation in my next piece. Why do I think Louis is asking? Why do I think that elite institutions of higher learning are not speaking out to support Israel? So, I assume that first and foremost on your minds is what's emerged from Harvard, but they're not the only ones. You know, let's speak about the United States right now, because I think that different countries around the world have different policies about free speech. And since many of you, I don't know how many of you are Americans, I assume that most of you are Americans, you have to understand that the American concept of freedom of speech is an extreme one, maybe the most extreme one in the world. For example, you know, in Canada, it's against the law to deny the Holocaust. If a teacher teaches Holocaust denial in a school in Canada, they lose their job. Okay, another and that's not the case in the United States. In other words, the idea of freedom of speech, freedom of expression in the United States is taken to an extreme, and it's taken even more to an extreme within the universities. Okay, which is supposed to be, you know, oases of open discourse, you know, and everybody can get to say what they want. Let me just share with you, my son is studying a semester abroad in Seville, in Spain. He's doing a semester there. He's studying economics, philosophy, and political science in Spanish. Speaks 5 languages, my kid. So another student was walking around campus with a Palestine shirt and a Palestinian flag on it in the last 2 days, and walked into one of Noam's classes. And so Noam wrote a letter to the head of the department, which he sent to me so I could vet and help him out with it, you know, complaining, look, how can this be acceptable that, you know, people were butchered and murdered? What's the message here? It's okay to walk around with that? You're supportive of that? I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel safe on campus in that situation. What are you going to do about it? So we're going to be sending. I'm still sharpening up this letter, and we're going to send it tomorrow, and we'll see what happens in Spain, okay, in Seville. In the U.S., I know over and over again you've had anti-Semitic incidents all over the United States. Forget about what we're talking about now. And a lot of universities have been very, very slow in their response in terms of dealing with those issues and protecting students, okay, of feeling safe on campus. So this should not surprise anybody. And of course, somebody waiting before, may have been Wayne, about moral equivalency. You know, they come up with all these kind of crazy moral equivalencies. I assume you've been following a lot of Harvard alumni. I've been shocked and horrified and complained to Harvard. Harvard got a lot of complaints about those pro-Palestinian organizations that came out, very pro-Hamas and anti-Israel, and they floated some kind of you know, again, some kind of queasy pushback. But this is par for the course of the United States. I'm not sure it's true globally. Remember, as Americans, America is very extreme freedom of speech, and it's part of the American ethos. And I mean, it's, you know, there's always this question of the slippery slope. If you prevent people from talking about X, you know, where does that stop? Okay, and probably many of you remember what happened in Skokie, Illinois in the 1970s. I was just a kid growing up in New York, and my father bought a plane ticket and took his baseball bat and was heading down there. You guys remember what happened in Skokie, Illinois in the 70s. Okay, so I mean, it's very extreme in the United States, and it's very hard to understand how that can happen. Okay, I'm being asked a question about can one separate Gazans from Hamas? That's in my last piece. We'll get to that. Okay. Are there still battles in the streets in Israel? Or has Hamas now retreated back into Gaza to fight? Okay, so very good question, Aaron. What we have been told as citizens in this country by the government 48 hours ago was that the IDF succeeded in clearing out all the terrorists from the country. Every single community that was attacked has been scoured and cleansed of terrorists. This is what we've been told by the Israeli government, and that's why the Israeli government defense establishment said we're going on the offensive now. First, we have to take care of what's happening inside the country. You know, I don't know. Maybe, you know, you had several thousands of terrorists entered Israel. Maybe some didn't stop and they continued north. Maybe some in Jerusalem. Maybe some of them linked up to other people in the West Bank. Maybe some of them marched around Tel Aviv. I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm being very honest. You know, they don't know. These people had a lot of time. It's a small country, had a lot of time, do a lot of damage, and also go pretty far geographically. So I simply don't know. But this is what the government has told us. The mass of Hamas have retreated back to Gaza, but a lot of those who retreat got killed. Once the Israeli army arrived at the scene, they got killed. Look, we had tens of thousands of soldiers who were fighting to clear these communities. We had tens of thousands of Israeli soldiers who had to fight in our civilian communities to clear them of the terrorists and to liberate people. A lot of terrorists hunkered down in people's homes with the people as captives. So it took like 72 hours to deal with that issue, and it was dealt with. But again, I can't say hand on heart, that I trust now the government that they know for sure that that's the case. But this is what we're being told here. Any truth to rumors that Trump gave Putin security info about Israel? I have no idea. I wouldn't even know where to find information about that. Again, my last piece, I'll talk about what Israel, what the scenarios are in terms of what Israel can or might do. Nobody's asking, is this the end for Netanyahu? So I'm going to try to stay out of politics, but I will say the following to the question. The Yom Kippur War, right after Yom Kippur War, there was actually an national election, and Golda Meir was reelected. But several months later, she had to abdicate. There were a lot of protests. It's hard for me to envision at the end of this story, when it's over, and I don't know when it's going to be over. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. It's hard for me to envision that Netanyahu and this government will be able to stay in power. It's hard for me to see it based on precedents in other Israeli cases, like the wake of the Yom Kippur War. It's very hard for me to see that, but I'm going to leave it at that. We're hearing that Egypt gave Israel multiple warnings of this. Is that accurate to my knowledge? So look, Prime Minister Netanyahu has unequivocally denied having received these warnings. A member of Congress who is on one of the important committees that relate to defense said that he knows that that Israel was warned by Egypt. That's something that will be investigated in the Blue Commission committee of inquiry that's going to take place at the end of this. Let me say a few more words about that. In Israel, we're very big on commissions of inquiry, serious ones. They're always led by former justice of the Supreme Court. They're very, very serious. It was done after Yom Kippur War. It was done the First Lebanon War. It was done in the outbreak of the Second Intifada. It was done. We had a whole slew of commissions of inquiry. Whereas they're not legally binding, they're very serious and they're totally exposed to the public. And I have no doubt that this question that Brooks is asking will be thoroughly investigated, and we will have the knowledge whether or not we were actually warned. Obviously, if we were, that's a good answer to Nomi's previous question about Netanyahu's political survival. Okay. One second. Second, have we heard any religious leaders with words of encouragement for Israel? I have not. It may be out there. It's worthwhile checking. I haven't. I haven't. It's a very good question. I don't have a good answer. Okay, I'm going to answer one more question here, and then I'm going to go to my last piece, which is answering a lot of your other questions, which is talking about where from here, where are we going from here? Not that I have any good answers. Brooks is asking, what is going on with the opinion of the Israeli Arab citizens? Brooks, I'm glad that you asked that question. First of all, Israeli Arab citizens have been empathetic and have been supportive of the state of Israel, period. I'll share with you, some of you know this, I've been training guides for many years, over 20 years, and there's a special Israeli guiding school that actually allows Palestinians from East Jerusalem to participate and get Israeli guiding licenses. Some of my former students who become friends have either called me or written to me. One of them, Hassan, who is a devout Muslim Sufi, Palestinian, wrote to me that he doesn't have the words to express the horror of these savage actions, and he prays that my family is safe. Another Palestinian friend of mine, Mahmoud, also very on the phone, very similar sentiments. So we have to be cautious and careful, also not painting everybody in the same color. With your permission, folks, because time is also running. Although I have time. I have lots of time. I want to go to my last piece, which is to be answering a lot of your questions, and then we'll take some more questions as well. So let's talk about some dilemmas we're facing now. I'm going to say something that may not resonate with some of you. My underlying assumption, and I think it's the assumption of the United States, Europeans, Israelis, is that Hamas are rational players. They're rational players. And rational players have interests and they have goals. And what is not clear now, because Hamas and Islam Jihad crossed so many thick red lines, like murdering babies, and they posted this stuff up so the world could see it. It's very difficult to kind of suss out what their goal, what their aim, their rational aim behind this might be. Because by doing this, they're basically almost forcing Israel to annihilate them. One
pretty good analysis, although, it's a good analysis, but it's a question mark, which appeared in today's New York Times, is that Hamas really wants to draw Israel into an urban quagmire in the Gaza Strip, that they're interested in doing that, and that they think that Israel can't win that for all sorts of reasons. I'm not sure that's the case, but it's mind-boggling to think that they went so far. And the truth is that, there's some pundits who are talking about, well, they were more successful than they could possibly imagined, and things got out of hand. Well, making videos during and after the fact is not getting out of hand. That is something that is systematic and is deliberate, and it's a tactic. So they let it get out of hand, and were directing it to go out of hand. And there's a big question mark in terms of, what was their end game, and within this context, is there any chance for us to get our captives back alive? How would that work? Now we know that there is movement on this issue. Qatar's involved, Egypt's involved, Germany's involved. These are, by the way, the usual suspects. They're the ones who always get involved in these kind of things. I'm saying that in a positive way, not a negative way. And there have been some, floating of ideas of some kind of humanitarian, training women, training women captives, that kind of stuff. And but thus far, we don't know too much about that. I want to go back to what Brooks asked about Israeli Arab citizens. Mansour Abbas, who is a member of Parliament, Israeli Parliament, the Knesset, who was head of an Islamic party, and was also in the previous government, made a public call that Hamas release the captives. He said this is against Islam to do this to women, to do this to children, to do this to unarmed people. This is against their faith, and they need to release them unequivocally now. So that's also important to say that. But going back to this issue of the captives, this is a huge dilemma. This is a huge dilemma. It's not one or two captives. This is anywhere between 100 and 200 Israeli citizens, most of whom are civilians. And, we're massively bombing now. We might be killing our civilians there. And this is also part of the problem. If we go for a land maneuver, going in with our troops, what is our goal? Is our goal to take away Hamas's military capacity? Is our goal to topple them entirely? Okay, so what is the goal there? Because it has to be a goal. Is the state of Israel willing to pay that price? Because we're talking about, for sure, thousands of Israeli troops are going to die in that, and probably tens of thousands at least of Gazans are going to die in that. And there's no certainty that we also be successful in a so-called land maneuver. Intensive bombing, same problem, with the absence of our troops getting killed, but our civilians who are captive will almost certainly be killed. And the question is effectiveness. It's probably not going to be effective in terms of the goals of recreating deterrence. Another dilemma: if we fail to understand Hamas's, from an intelligence perspective, true intentions, maybe we fail to understand Hezbollah's true intentions right now. Maybe we don't know, there are all kinds of questions now. Maybe Hezbollah is waiting for us to waste all of our Iron Dome projectiles, and then they're going to start shooting barrages of missiles on us. Maybe they're going to wait until we're dragged into a quagmire there, and then they're going to attack us massively. So, there are a lot of big questions here, a lot of big dilemmas of things that we simply don't have good answers to. I think it's important to say that we're not hearing a lot of public voices of revenge and vengeance. It's not about that. The question is, what are our next moves? What can we do that will reshape the situation? Because Israel is no longer the same country, and we don't have security.
And this has to end. This has to stop. We're the ones to do it. And it's not unequivocally clear what the right way to go about doing this is. I have to say that for the last 20 years at least, there's been an underlying assumption in Israel that Israeli society would not be willing to pay the price of having their kids die, okay, recapturing the Gaza Strip. That has been an underlying national assumption. I'm not sure that that's really the case anymore. I'm not sure that's the case. We haven't been faced with the dilemmas we're facing now, ever. And this is also not about what the world thinks or doesn't think. It's about what do we do to make our situation better. As I said before, civil society has really stepped up to the plate in a big way, Finally, as of several hours ago, we have a war management cabinet that hopefully will be able to do this better. I will do it right. By the way, we're having people who had shed their uniforms, people who are senior officers, big fighters, but they're now in their late 50s, early 60s, and they shed the uniform a decade ago or 5 years ago, and they're coming back as advisors. So you now have a bolstering of people with a lot of experience who are also sitting in the command together with the commands of today. So also bolstering them, there's more confidence and there's more brains involved in that. It's very, very important. Cannot understate that the United States support President Biden, and also his actions and his words have been very, very meaningful to Israelis. Very meaningful. I'm not saying that as somebody who's a dual citizen. It's been very meaningful for Israelis who are not Americans like myself, in terms of morale. But we're wounded. We are wounded. That makes us also dangerous, by the way. It makes us very dangerous. It is a very, very tough spot. And certainly I don't have answers for everything. Let me take some of the more questions that have come in that I may not have answered in this last piece. Let me go back up here with your permission, because you deserve it, and give me a few moments to scroll up and try to see if I've missed something here. Has intelligence been improved? Abby, look, intelligence is also about the people who are analyzing the data, the raw materials. We have one of the most sophisticated intelligence collections operations in the world. But at the end of the day, these are people who have to analyze it. And this was a colossal intelligence snafu. And obviously, we have to get our house in order. You don't improve intelligence in 5 days. So it's going to take time. And I mentioned the fact that we're now questioning, wait a second, we think we have Hezbollah deterred, maybe we don't. Maybe we're misreading them, we misread Hamas. Wayne asked the question, how would Israel divide the troops if the northern border becomes a front as well? So, Wayne, very good question. First of all, let's understand something. In terms of manpower, Hezbollah has no more than 30,000 fairly well trained or a lot of experience, combat experience fighters. Hamas has 15,000, something like that. And we're one of the larger armies in the world. So we don't have a manpower there. That's not the issue. Okay. What are our issues if another front opens up with Hezbollah? Without any connection, let's say everything was quiet on the Gazan front. Let's say what happened on Saturday didn't happen. If Hezbollah initiated the war with us, Hezbollah is holding somewhere between 100 and 150,000 missiles, rockets, projectiles, several thousands of which are high-precision GPS-guided missiles with very heavy payloads that can overcome our fortified safe spaces. The quantity and quality of projectiles in the hands of Hezbollah would without a doubt overwhelm and saturate our very, very good missile defense systems. And in the event of Hezbollah entering into the fray, I've said this for years now, I have no doubt of the following two things. Number one, Thousands of Israeli civilians are going to die. A lot of our economic infrastructure is going to take a bad hit, but we're going to devastate Lebanon as a country. And we'll pull out all the stops. The issue is not manpower. The problem there is that the home front is going to take it. It's going to take the brunt of it. And the fortified safe spaces, just like tanks, you can always overcome a defense with a good offense. You can always penetrate these things. Nothing's impenetrable, including our fortified safe spaces. You take down a whole building, it ain't going to save you. If you have that kind of ordnance, okay, in what you're setting on us, if a missile takes down a whole building, the safe spaces there are not going to save the people in them, with all due respect. So we don't know how many, civilians don't know how many of those types of weapons they have, but they are very, 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 very well armed. And by the way, that's why it's very good news the United States also sent the aircraft carrier to our region, because having coordinated help bombing those guys, and also having U.S. missile defense systems also in that array, and Israel and U.S. practice a lot together of integrating the various missile defense systems and also offensive systems. We've done a lot of practicing together with the United States U.S. military. Israeli military did it just a few weeks ago, finished a major exercise that would deal with a multi-front scenario. So this is something that is taken into consideration. So it's very good and very nice. The United States has sent the aircraft carrier. And that will definitely bolster our capacity. But no, we will still be harmed, not existentially, but we're going to take, especially the home front is going to take a very, very big hit if we fight Hezbollah, even without Gaza on the plate. And by the way, I have to say honestly, if they open up, I can see a situation where we say, okay, we're now going to take care of the northern front. We've stabilized the southern front right now. We'll take care. Let's take care of them first. We'll go back and we'll deal with Hamas when we finish up with Hezbollah. I mean, we don't have to multitask necessarily in that context. We're on the offensive now in the south, not so much on the defense. Yes, they're still shooting barrages of rockets at us, and some are getting through. But the big picture now is that we're more on the offense there, much more on the offense in the south than on the defense. Which means that if we had to, we could also deal with a lot of manpower on the northern front. Okay, more questions have come in. 1 second. Do I think an invasion of Gaza can work, realistically speaking? An Israeli invasion of Gaza, let's call it a land maneuver, and taking over the Gaza Strip or dramatically undermining and damaging Hamas's military capabilities can be done. It's not a mission impossible. The question is just the price. Okay, the question is just the price. The price Israel's willing to pay for that, and it's without a doubt going to be a very high price. That's why it's very important. If I haven't said this up to now, we're not in the midst of this. We're in the beginning of this. We're in the beginning, not in the middle. We're just in the beginning. This is going to be long and drawn out. And it's going to be very, very ugly and very painful. And I'm not saying with any kind of relish. I'm saying actually with dread. But that's what we're going to go with this. And so it's not impossible. But the real question is, Susan, everybody else. Okay, let's say we recapture the Gaza Strip. What's the end game? Who's in charge? We pulled out of Gaza in 2005 because we did not want to continue to control their lives. And we extended an olive branch. And 3 days later, they shot rockets onto Sderot. So, we don't want to be running their lives there. That's not a good model. We know that. So how does it work? I don't think Israel has the only answer. We'd have to bring in the international community if they're willing to come in. And what would that look like? I don't know. But without a doubt, there's a political question here, which is very important. You have to have some kind of political goal at the end of a war. Just to fight with no purpose to kill people that's not a goal. There has to be a political goal or end game. And this is one of the things that I'm sure the Israeli government is grappling with as we speak at this moment. I have no doubt. Okay, what sort of dynamic and cooperative spirit will result from the new cabinet that still includes Haredi, ultra-Orthodox, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who extreme right, and Bezalel Smotrich, who was also extreme right. Is this why Yair Lapid, who was the head of the opposition, has yet to join it? Thank you for the question, Susan. And as I mentioned before, I'm trying very hard not to talk politics, but I'll tell you what, very, very briefly, what is happening here. What was established now was this is what is being, I'm translating from the awkward Hebrew into awkward English, a war management cabinet. The war management cabinet is consisting now of 3 people: Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant, and Benny Gantz. So, and Gadi Eisenkot, who was in Gantz's party and was an excellent former chief of staff, will be sitting in that cabinet as an observer, as will Ron Dermer, who is a confidant of Netanyahu, who has 0 military experience. He's a political confidant of the prime minister. They're sitting in that cabinet, not Ben-Gvir, not Smotrich, nobody else. Lapid has been offered also to be in that cabinet as an observer. So this is important, okay? So the presumption is there's going to be a cooperative spirit over there, okay? I don't know why Lapid has not joined yet. He wasn't initially, Lapid was the first one to offer the prime minister to create an emergency, like a unified emergency government, and Netanyahu preferred to speak to Gantz, who is also in opposition, but he's the junior, not senior, head of the opposition. It is what it is. That's also politics, but I don't want to continue down that road right now with you all. What else we have here? Leslie, how can Israel retaliate yet still maintain its humanity? As we used to say back in the day, this is the $64,000 question, isn't it? As I mentioned before, I'm sure no country, decent or indecent, could stay complacent or not react forcibly when 1,200 and growing of its citizens have been murdered and between 100 and 200 have been taken captive. No decent or indecent country can accept that. And the question of proportionality here, while it's on the table, it's problematic, because at the end of the day, if Israel is not successful in creating a significant deterrent that will prevent this from happening again, then we're back to square one, and square one is babies getting their heads cut off. So I think that there's an issue here, and I am cognizant of the fact that you have many, many, many innocent people in Gaza, okay? Not everybody is for Hamas, and not everybody is for doing what was done. I have no doubt about that. It's not supposition. Having said that, we're in a bind. This is part of the bind. This is part of the bind. And because they also have our captives there, and because of the red lines that they crossed, it's a very, very difficult situation. I don't have any good answers. And I think that there are also problems of trying to judge this with some kind of moral calculus. Because something so immoral took place that anybody who's decent, doesn't matter if you're, let's say you're super duper Palestinian, so cutting off babies' heads. Okay, like so stuff that's you can't even, this is inexcusable for normative, decent human beings. So the question is, what do you do now as a country that you have a monster that did these things and will do more of these things if that monster is not deterred? And what do you have to do to deter that monster or to destroy that monster? What is the price that has to be paid? By the way, chances are if we do a land maneuver okay, meaning capturing or Gaza, or we continue with the bombing, we're going to end up killing our civilians. We don't want to do that either. This is a dilemma that is impossible. I think the real answer is all the choices are bad choices. All of Israel's choices now are bad. Simple as all that. They're all bad. And I'm not being glib. I'm saying that heartbroken. Heartbroken. I don't want to see the sights of also people bombed out. I don't want to see that. There are human beings on the other side as well. But we have to do something to recreate basic security in our country. Any country would do that. And it's not even a question of what others would do. This is what we need to do. And the question is, what exactly and how exactly? And I don't have any good answers, and I'm also not running the show. I'm sorry, that's the best I can do, and I apologize. I hope that was not too forceful. It's very painful. It's very painful for people living here, people who have been part of trying to make peace for decades. And, no, Hamas is not a liberation movement. Hamas is like ISIS. That's what we've all learned now. There's no other way of viewing them. I'm sorry to say. Same thing with Islamic Jihad. How do you talk to people who cut off heads of babies? What's there to talk about? It's like talking to Nazis. What does it talk about? Is it possible to separate Gazans from Hamas, or are they truly one? This is a question from Abby. Look, in 2006, when you had the last fair, open, transparent elections in the Gaza Strip, Hamas got 44% of the vote. They got a plurality, but they got 44% of the vote. And that vote was, as we know, was a protest vote against corrupt Fatah, which is basically the Palestinian Authority. We also understand that Hamas very, very tightly controls everything that goes on in the Gaza Strip. They've succeeded in doing that, in controlling everything. And it's clear, it's very, very clear that no, Gazans and Hamas are not one and the same. I was with I started off telling you I got an African-American political leadership group 3 weeks ago, and we went to Wolfson Center. It was the hospital in Cologne, a place called Save a Child's Heart. And there was a Gazan Palestinian physician who met us there, who was getting training in Israel to give, heart surgery for in the Gaza Strip. And we had a candid discussion with her, and she's like, you have Hamas who are interrogating her, and she gets interrogated by Israel. She went back, and they finally earned their trust. And she, it's very, she just wants to help people. And I took her aside at some point and said, how can you, she basically said to me, I got to get out of that place. It's unsustainable. And Hamas is it's just a nightmare there. Now, this is just one person, and it's not fair for me to choose an example, but it is very important for me to say that it's too easy to paint everybody the same color. It's just too easy to do it. And it doesn't reflect reality. It really does not. How many Gazans are pro-Hamas at this moment? I have no idea. Can you imagine the Gazans who are losing their homes because of what Hamas did are not happy with Hamas at this point? Can we imagine that? I can, but we don't know. At this point now, we don't know. But yeah, I think we have to separate the Gazans and Hamas conceptually. What do we do on the ground with that? As I mentioned before, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Is it accurate to say that even this? By the way, we're now an hour and 23 minutes into this, and I can keep going. I'm willing to keep going with those who want to, but I don't want to keep people hostage here on this Zoom. So I'm going to answer this last question now. Okay, take a 2-minute break and drink some water. And those who want to stay on and ask questions, writing the chat, I'll be happy to stay here and continue that for another, let's say, 20 minutes. Okay, it's now 10:23 at night here. So I'll be happy to do that, but I also want to let my people go, those who want to go. Would it be accurate to say that even non-combatant Gazans are somewhat culpable for harboring terrorists? Look, Brooks, as I said before, Hamas rules with an iron fist over Gaza. I can't, it's not that I can't imagine. I know that not all Gazans are culpable for what happened on Saturday. And those who can see these things are probably horrified and probably thinking, okay, now what's going to happen is Israel's going to come in and kill us all. Okay, so, and they're also, there's no such thing as, you know, as too many people that none of them are decent human beings. I'm not familiar with an entire human society that everybody's bad. I'm not familiar with that kind of phenomenon, and I can't impose that phenomenon also on all the Gazans. But that might be me. Maybe I'm naive. But it defies logic as far as I'm concerned to say that all Gazans are bad or culpable or pro Hamas. All right. So as I said, I think that we're wrapping. It's a partial wrap. I need about 2 minutes just to drink some water and rest my throat. But I am certainly willing to stay here if people would like to ask more questions. I'm willing to do that. Let me just say one more time. I'm heartbroken, and many people living here are heartbroken. It's hard for me to see right now a light at the end of the tunnel. It's hard. It's hard. It's very hard. Not even a glimmering light at the end of the tunnel right now. And I'm even worried about the day after this thing is over. Because to be honest with you, what's been going on in Israel up till now is not disappeared overnight. It doesn't work that way. We're unified now because we're under attack, but all that stuff is there, and it's waiting to reemerge, and it's going to emerge with a lot more force than when it disappeared now. I mentioned the fact that we have already people calling for Prime Minister's resignation. The Israeli people are going to have the last word on this, and I'm just worried. I've been here for 40 years. I've been here for 40 years, and this kind of uncertainty I haven't felt here ever, not just personally but nationally. This is a real inflection point that it's really hard to see how we get out of this thicket. And as I mentioned, there are no good choices. So on that not so optimistic note, I apologize for that. Wish all of you safety. Wish us safety here too as well. Thank you for participating in this session. And like I said, I'll be back here in 2 minutes to continue answering questions for those who would like to continue this session.
Fantastic. And as Avi mentioned, it's just a short little break. We will stop the recording after my formal close, so it'll be a little bit more of an informal session for those of you that would like to stick around. I want to thank Avi for today's event. I know I speak for all of us at CWB and our entire community that we are so grateful for his expertise and willingness to be here today. We are all holding you, Avi, your family, and all of Israel in our prayers. At CWB, we are fully aware of the transformative power and that knowledge and the profound influence that community support can provide. CWB is working to compile a list of ways our community can extend their support to Israel. These opportunities will span a spectrum of engagement. We will be sending these along with our follow-up email and a special email to educators, hopefully on Friday. We believe in the power of education, community, and empathy to foster positive change. Together, we can bring hope and meaningful assistance to Israel and its people. Thank you all for joining us today.